The morning Jake Mitchell woke up to screaming, he figured it was just another crazy Tuesday in downtown Detroit. The dude had seen plenty of wild stuff go down in his 28 years living in the Motor City, but nothing, and he meant absolutely nothing, could have prepared him for what was about to go down. He rolled out of his cramped studio apartment bed around 6:30, the kind of early that made his bones ache, and stumbled toward his grimy window overlooking Woodward Avenue. What he saw made his blood run cold and his coffee cup slip right out of his hands, shattering across the hardwood floor. People were straight up eating each other down there. Not like some metaphorical corporate America garbage, but actually tearing into flesh like it was an all-you-can-eat buffet at Golden Corral. Jake rubbed his eyes hard, thinking maybe he'd finally lost it, maybe all those double shifts at the warehouse had finally fried his brain. But nope, when he looked again, the nightmare was still happening. A woman in a business suit had her teeth buried in some poor guy's shoulder while he screamed and flailed. A kid, couldn't have been more than 16, was sprinting down the sidewalk with 3 of those things chasing after him like he owed them money. Except money wasn't what they were after. Jake's phone buzzed on the nightstand, making him jump about 3 feet in the air. It was his buddy Marcus from the warehouse, and the text made his stomach drop. "Yo man, don't go outside. Don't go anywhere. This is real. They're saying it's everywhere. Stay inside and lock everything." Jake's fingers trembled as he typed back, asking what the hell was going on, but Marcus didn't reply. The 3 little dots appeared and disappeared twice before going dark completely. That silence scared Jake more than anything he'd seen out the window. Across town in the suburbs of Dearborn, 24-year-old Emma Rodriguez was having a similarly messed up morning. She'd been up since 5, getting ready for her shift at Henry Ford Hospital where she worked as an ER nurse. Emma had seen some gnarly stuff come through those emergency room doors, but the overnight crew had apparently dealt with something that had the whole hospital in lockdown mode. Her supervisor had called her at 5:15, voice shaking, telling her not to come in, to stay home, to keep her doors locked and windows shut. When Emma asked why, her supervisor, Patricia, a woman who'd worked through riots and shootings without breaking a sweat, just whispered, "They're not dying, Emma. We can't kill them. They just keep coming." Emma had laughed it off at first, thinking Patricia was pulling some kind of elaborate prank, but then she'd turned on the news. Every channel showed the same horrifying images. New York was burning. Los Angeles had gone dark. Chicago's downtown had turned into an absolute war zone. The reporters looked terrified, their professional composure cracking as they described attacks, bites, and the victims rising back up with empty eyes and an insatiable hunger. The CDC had issued an emergency broadcast around 6 a.m., using words like unknown pathogen and aggressive transmission and avoid all contact with infected individuals. Emma's nursing training kicked in, and she started mentally cataloging supplies, thinking about water, food, first aid. Her little house suddenly felt way too exposed, with its big windows and flimsy locks. Meanwhile, in the heart of downtown Detroit, 42-year-old Thomas Bennett was stuck in his office on the 15th floor of the Renaissance Center. The corporate lawyer had come in early to prep for a major case, and now he was regretting every single life choice that had led him to this moment. The building's security had locked everything down around 6:45, and Tom had watched from his window as the streets below descended into absolute chaos. Cars crashed into each other, people ran in every direction, and those things, those infected people, spread through the crowds like a virus made visible. Tom's wife, Linda, was at their home in Birmingham with their 2 kids, and he'd been trying to call her for the past 20 minutes with no luck. The cell networks were getting hammered, calls dropping left and right. When he finally got through, Linda was crying, saying their neighbor Mr. Patterson had tried to break down their door, that his eyes were all wrong, that he was making these awful sounds. Tom told her to take the kids, get in the car, and drive to her sister's place up north, somewhere rural, somewhere away from people. But Linda said the news was reporting that the highways were parking lots, that people were abandoning their cars and running, that those things were everywhere. Back at Jake's apartment, the young warehouse worker had spent the last 30 minutes glued to his phone and laptop, trying to figure out what the hell was happening. The internet was going crazy with theories. Some people said it was a terrorist attack, some kind of biological weapon. Others were talking about a mutated rabies virus that had jumped from animals to humans. The religious folks were calling it the end times, Judgment Day, all that apocalyptic stuff. Jake didn't care about the why right then, he just needed to figure out how to survive. His apartment was decent for keeping people out, but he was on the 3rd floor with no fire escape, which meant if those things got inside the building, he'd be trapped like a rat. He started taking inventory. 2 boxes of cereal, half a loaf of bread, some peanut butter, 3 cans of soup, and a bunch of ramen noodles. Not exactly a survival bunker's worth of supplies. His tap water was still running, so he started filling every container he could find, pots, bowls, his bathtub. Jake had seen enough zombie movies to know utilities probably wouldn't last long. The thought made him laugh bitterly. Zombie movies. This was real life, and he was preparing for zombies. What a trip. The screaming outside was getting worse, more frequent, echoing off the buildings. Jake could hear things closer now too, inside his building. Doors slamming, people yelling, footsteps pounding up and down the stairwell. Someone was banging on doors, begging to be let in. Jake's hand hovered over his own doorknob, every decent bone in his body wanting to help, but Marcus's text flashed in his mind. Stay inside. Lock everything. He stepped back from the door, hating himself a little, but knowing that opening it could mean death. Emma had turned her little house into a fortress as best she could. The Rodriguez family hadn't been big on guns, much to her dad's disappointment, but Emma had found a baseball bat in the garage and a pretty solid kitchen knife set. She'd pushed her couch against the front door, dragged her dresser in front of the back door, and closed all the curtains. The news was still playing on her laptop, but the broadcasts were getting weirder, more desperate. Some stations had just gone to emergency broadcast signals. Others showed anchors abandoning their desks mid-sentence. One camera in New York just showed an empty studio with papers scattered everywhere and what looked like blood on the walls. Her phone rang, making her jump so hard she nearly stabbed herself with the knife she was holding. It was her brother, Diego, calling from Ann Arbor where he went to University of Michigan. Emma, thank God, he gasped. Are you okay? Is Mom with you? Their mother lived in southwest Detroit, in the old neighborhood where they'd grown up. Emma's heart seized. She hadn't even thought to call their mom yet, too focused on fortifying her own place. She told Diego to hold on and tried to three-way call their mother, but the call wouldn't connect. Diego said he was going to try to drive down, to get both of them and bring them back to Ann Arbor, but Emma told him that was insane, that the roads were death traps. They argued for a few minutes before the call just dropped, the connection lost. Thomas Bennett had found a few other people stuck in the Renaissance Center, mostly security guards and a couple of other workaholics who'd come in early. They'd gathered in the main lobby, trying to figure out a plan. One of the security guards, a solid dude named Kevin Porter who looked like he could handle himself, had taken charge. Kevin had military experience, served 2 tours in Afghanistan, and his calm demeanor was the only thing keeping everyone from completely losing it. He explained that they had supplies in the building, vending machines and a cafeteria, enough to last a while if they were smart about it. The building was secure for now, but Kevin said they needed to think long-term. A woman from accounting, Ashley Thompson, kept insisting they should try to leave, try to get home to their families. She had a daughter at home with a babysitter, and the terror in her voice was raw and real. Kevin gently explained that going outside right now was suicide, that they needed to wait, to see how this played out. But Ashley wasn't hearing it. She made a break for the doors, and it took 3 people to hold her back as she screamed and cried. Tom understood her desperation completely. He'd do anything to get back to Linda and the kids, but he also knew Kevin was right. The streets were a slaughterhouse. As the morning dragged into afternoon, the situation deteriorated fast. The military rolled into Detroit around noon, tanks and armed personnel carriers rumbling down the streets, soldiers in hazmat suits setting up checkpoints. Jake watched from his window as they gunned down infected people without hesitation, the gunfire echoing like thunder. At first, he felt relieved, like the cavalry had arrived, but then he noticed something that made his stomach turn. For every infected person the soldiers dropped, 2 more seemed to appear. And the ones who got shot but not hit in the head just kept coming, kept crawling forward even with bullets in their chests. The power went out around 2 p.m. Jake had been expecting it, but the sudden silence of his fridge and the darkness that followed still freaked him out. Thankfully it was daytime, so he had natural light, but he knew nighttime was going to be a whole different kind of scary. His phone battery was at 60%, and he had a portable charger that was fully juiced, so he had some time before he'd be completely cut off. The water was still running though, which was something. He'd filled his bathtub in every pot he owned, so even when it stopped, he'd have some reserves. Emma's neighborhood had gone eerily quiet after the initial chaos. She'd heard gunshots earlier, screams, car alarms, but now there was just this oppressive silence that was somehow worse. She knew what it meant. Either everyone was hiding like her, or they were dead, or they'd turned into those things. She tried calling her mom probably 50 times, but the calls wouldn't go through. The cellular network had basically collapsed under the strain. Her laptop still had internet though, running off her neighbor's Wi-Fi that was apparently still working, and the forums and social media were absolute madness. People were sharing survival tips, locations of safe zones, theories about the infection. Emma read everything she could, her nursing brain trying to make sense of the medical aspects. From what people were describing, the infection spread through bites and possibly other fluid contact. The incubation period was fast, like crazy fast, sometimes just minutes. Once infected, people developed a high fever, lost consciousness, and then reanimated with no sign of their former personality or humanity. They were driven purely by the need to feed, to spread the infection. Headshots seemed to be the only reliable way to stop them permanently. It was like every zombie movie had somehow become a documentary. One post caught her attention. A doctor in Chicago was theorizing that the infection attacked the brain, specifically the parts responsible for higher reasoning and impulse control, while leaving the brain stem and motor functions intact. It was like the person died, but their body kept going, driven by base instincts. The doctor said they'd tried everything in the ER, every antiviral, every treatment they could think of, but nothing worked. Once someone turned, they were gone. Emma felt tears rolling down her cheeks as she read. All her training, all her medical knowledge, and there was nothing she could do to fight this. Thomas Bennett and his group in the Renaissance Center had settled into an uneasy routine. Kevin had organized them into watches, people taking turns monitoring the doors and windows. They'd raided the vending machines in the cafeteria, stockpiling everything in a secure room on the second floor. There were 12 of them total, a random mix of lawyers, security guards, cleaning staff, and one extremely stressed out intern named Bobby Martinez who looked like he might pass out at any moment. Tom had taken the kid under his wing, trying to keep him calm, keep him focused. Around 4 p.m., they heard banging on the main doors. A group of survivors outside, maybe 15 or 20 people, begging to be let in. Kevin looked through the security monitors, studying the crowd. Most of them looked okay, normal, but he pointed out 2 people at the back who were moving wrong, twitching, their eyes vacant. Infected, trying to hide in a group of survivors to get inside. It was the first sign that these things had some kind of rudimentary intelligence, or at least predatory cunning. Kevin made the hard call. They couldn't open the doors, couldn't risk it. The people outside screamed and pleaded, and Tom had to walk away, couldn't watch as they eventually gave up and ran off, with the infected ones pursuing. As night fell, the city transformed into something out of a nightmare. Fires burned unchecked across Detroit, the orange glow visible for miles. The sounds were worse in the dark, moans and screams and the constant background noise of car alarms and breaking glass. Jake sat in his dark apartment, bat across his lap, listening to the building around him. Someone was crying in the unit above him. Below, he could hear shuffling, banging, the sounds of those things wandering the hallways. At some point, his building had been breached, and infected were inside. He'd blocked his door with his couch and bookshelf, but the apartment door wasn't exactly Fort Knox. If a bunch of those things decided they wanted in, he wasn't sure how long his barricade would hold. Jake's mind raced with options. He could try to make a run for it, but to where? The streets were suicide. He could stay put and hope they didn't notice him, didn't smell him or hear him or whatever sense they used to hunt. That seemed like the best bet for now, but eventually he'd run out of food and water. Then what? His phone buzzed with a text. Marcus. Still alive, man. Holed up at the warehouse with some of the crew. Got supplies, got weapons. If you can make it here, we got room. But don't try at night. Wait for dawn. And be careful, they're everywhere. Jake felt a surge of hope mixed with fear. The warehouse was about 2 miles away, which normally would be an easy trip, but in this new world might as well be 1,000 miles. Still, it was a goal, a destination, something better than slowly starving in his apartment. He texted back that he'd try to make it in the morning, and Marcus sent him a route, side streets and alleys that might be less crowded with infected. Emma had spent the day fortifying, planning, and trying desperately to reach her family. As darkness fell and her house creaked and settled around her, she realized she'd never felt more alone in her life. The internet was still sporadically working, and she'd joined a few survivor groups, people sharing information and trying to coordinate. One group was organizing a convoy to head north, up to the Upper Peninsula where the population was sparse. They were planning to leave in 2 days, meeting at a rally point near the Detroit city limits. Emma marked the location, thinking about it. Could she make it there? Should she try? The sound of breaking glass somewhere nearby made her freeze. She heard voices, people yelling, and then gunshots. Not military gunshots, but pistols, rifles, civilians fighting back. The gunfire was followed by screams, and then that awful moaning sound the infected made. Emma gripped her baseball bat tighter and crept to her window, peeking through the curtains. 3 houses down, her neighbors, the Johnsons, were making a stand in their front yard. Mr. Johnson had a shotgun and was firing at a group of infected stumbling across his lawn. He dropped 2 before the shotgun clicked empty. Mrs. Johnson threw a Molotov cocktail, the homemade bomb exploding in a burst of flame that engulfed 3 more infected. For a moment, Emma thought they might make it, might actually fight them off. But then more came, drawn by the noise and the light. Dozens of them, emerging from between houses, from the street, from everywhere. The Johnsons ran for their car, but they didn't make it. Emma turned away before she saw the end, her hand over her mouth, fighting the urge to vomit. She couldn't help them. Going out there would just mean dying with them. She hated this new world, hated the calculations it forced her to make, the way it turned neighbors into strangers and survival into the only morality that mattered. Back at the Renaissance Center, Thomas Bennett couldn't sleep. He was supposed to be resting, his watch shift didn't start for another 3 hours, but every time he closed his eyes he saw Linda and the kids. His daughter Sophie was only 7, his son Mark was 10. What were they going through right now? Were they scared? Were they safe? The not knowing was eating him alive from the inside out. He tried calling so many times that his phone had died, even with his attempts to conserve battery. Bobby, the intern, was sitting nearby, also unable to sleep. The kid was scrolling through his phone, reading news updates by the light of an emergency lantern. "It's everywhere," Bobby said quietly. Every major city in America, and spreading to Europe and Asia. They're saying it started somewhere in Pennsylvania, some kind of accident at a research facility, but who knows if that's true. Tom grunted. It didn't really matter where it started, only where they went from here. Bobby continued, some areas are holding though. The military has established safe zones in several cities. They're airlifting people out to secure locations, islands, military bases, places that can be defended. There's a safe zone at Selfridge Air National Guard Base, up near Mount Clemens. They're taking refugees. Tom perked up at that. Selfridge was maybe 30 miles from Detroit, normally a 40-minute drive. In current conditions, it might as well be on the moon, but it was something, a destination, a goal. He asked Bobby to show him the information, and the intern pulled up an official CDC and FEMA website that was somehow still running. Sure enough, there were evacuation points listed, Selfridge being the closest to Detroit. They were running helicopter evacuations from designated pickup zones throughout the metro area, but the schedule was sporadic and the zones kept changing as areas got overrun. Kevin, who apparently also couldn't sleep, joined their quiet conversation. The security guard studied the information and nodded slowly. Selfridge is real. I got a buddy who's stationed there. If we can get there, we'd be safe, or at least safer than here. The three of them, joined by Ashley and a few others who'd woken up or couldn't sleep, started planning. The Renaissance Center wouldn't be safe forever. Eventually, their food would run out, or the infected would find a way in, or something else would go wrong. They needed an exit strategy. Kevin suggested they wait a few days, see if the situation stabilized, if the military presence increased. If things got worse, they'd make a run for it in vehicles, sticking to side streets and being ready to bail and go on foot if necessary. It wasn't a great plan, but it was something. Tom felt a glimmer of hope. If he could get to Selfridge, maybe Linda could too. Maybe they'd find each other there, maybe the kids would be okay. He held on to that thought like a lifeline. Jake Mitchell barely slept that night, dozing in fits and starts, jerking awake at every sound. When dawn finally broke around 7 a.m., he was exhausted but wired with adrenaline. He packed a backpack with what little food he had, filled 2 water bottles, and grabbed his bat. Marcus's route was memorized, burned into his brain from staring at it all night. 2 miles. He could do 2 miles. He'd run track in high school, granted that was 10 years and too many beers ago, but the body remembers, right? Jake moved his barricade as quietly as possible and cracked open his door. The hallway was a mess, trash scattered everywhere, doors hanging open, dark stains on the carpet that he didn't want to think about. No movement though, no sound. He slipped out, keeping low, keeping quiet, and made for the stairwell. The elevator was obviously not an option even if the power was on. The stairwell was dark and reeked like something had died in there, which something probably had. He used his phone's flashlight, wincing at how exposed the light made him feel, but he needed to see where he was stepping. On the second floor landing, he found his first infected. Old Mrs. Chen from 2B, or what used to be Mrs. Chen. She was hunched in the corner, gnawing on something Jake didn't look at too closely. She didn't notice him at first, too focused on her meal, and Jake crept past her, barely breathing. But his backpack scraped against the wall, making a soft sound, and her head snapped up. Dead eyes locked onto him, and she lurched to her feet with a hiss. Jake didn't think, just swung his bat, connecting with her head with a sickening crack. She went down hard, twitched once, and went still. Jake stood there, shaking, staring at what he'd just done. He'd killed Mrs. Chen. Sure, she was already dead, already turned, but still. His hands wouldn't stop trembling. No time to process it. He heard more sounds above him, more of them coming. Jake bolted down the remaining stairs and burst out the building's side door into the early morning light. The street was a disaster, abandoned cars everywhere, trash, bodies, and groups of infected wandering aimlessly. The living dead. Jake stuck to the plan, cutting through an alley behind his building, heading east toward Marcus's warehouse. Every shadow made his heart race, every sound made him want to run screaming. He passed a crashed police car, the officers inside clearly dead and turned, straining against their seatbelts to get at him. He passed a pharmacy that had been looted, glass everywhere, medications scattered across the sidewalk. 3 blocks in, he ran into other survivors. A group of 5 people, armed with various improvised weapons, moving in the opposite direction. They eyed each other warily, everyone trying to figure out if the others were dangerous. An older black man with a crowbar asked Jake where he was headed, and Jake mentioned the warehouse. The man nodded and said they were trying to get to a church up north that was supposedly taking people in, offering shelter. He warned Jake that the infected seemed more active at night, that moving during the day was smarter, and to avoid anywhere that looked like a lot of people had gathered. Infected congregated where they'd last fed, where they'd found prey. Jake thanked him and they parted ways, 2 groups of strangers in a strange new world. The warehouse was a beautiful sight when Jake finally spotted it, a big concrete building surrounded by a chain-link fence that Marcus and the crew had reinforced with sheet metal and lumber. There were people on the roof, keeping watch, and they spotted Jake when he was still a block away. He waved, shouted Marcus's name, and after a tense moment, someone waved back. The gate swung open just enough for him to slip through before slamming shut again. Marcus was there, pulling him into a brief hug before stepping back to look him over. "You made it, man. I wasn't sure you would." Jake just laughed, slightly hysterical, the adrenaline crash hitting him hard. Inside the warehouse, there were maybe 20 people, workers from the warehouse and their families, a few people they'd rescued from nearby. They had food, water, weapons, and a plan. Marcus explained they were fortifying, planning to sit tight until the military situation became clearer. If things got worse, they'd make a run for it, head north to Canada maybe, or out to the countryside. For now, they had safety in numbers and supplies to last a while. Jake felt tears of relief prick his eyes. He wasn't alone anymore. Emma Rodriguez made her decision when the sun came up. She couldn't stay in her house, couldn't just wait to run out of supplies or for those things to break in. The convoy heading north was leaving in 2 days, and she was going to be on it. But first, she had to try to reach her mother. Southwest Detroit was maybe 5 miles away, and Emma knew the neighborhoods well, had grown up there. If she was smart, if she was careful, she could make it. She packed a bag with supplies, changed into practical clothes, jeans, boots, a jacket, and grabbed her bat and knife. Her hands were steady as she moved her barricades. All those years of nursing, of dealing with emergencies and staying calm under pressure, it was all kicking in now. The streets of Dearborn were eerily quiet in the early morning. Emma moved carefully, sticking to backyards and alleys when she could, avoiding main roads. She saw infected, but they were scattered, individuals wandering aimlessly. She learned quickly that if she stayed quiet and didn't draw attention, they often didn't notice her. It was when you ran, when you made noise, that they came after you. She passed houses that showed signs of struggle, broken windows, blood, doors hanging open. She passed others that were locked up tight like hers had been, curtains drawn, people hiding inside. About 2 miles in, Emma came across a small group of survivors pinned down in a gas station. 6 infected had them trapped inside, pressing against the glass doors and windows. Emma watched from across the street, trying to decide if she should help or keep moving. The old Emma, the nurse Emma, couldn't just walk away. She picked up a rock and threw it at a car down the street, setting off its alarm. The infected's heads snapped toward the sound, and they stumbled off to investigate. Emma ran to the gas station and banged on the door. "Come on, move now while they're distracted." The survivors, a young couple and their teenage son, burst out and followed Emma as she ran. They made it 2 blocks before the car alarm stopped and the infected started following again. Emma led them on a winding route, finally losing their pursuers near a small park. The family thanked her breathlessly, and the father, introducing himself as David Williams, asked where she was headed. When Emma explained about trying to reach her mother, David said they were trying to get to Selfridge, that they'd heard it was safe there. Emma filed that information away and they parted ways, wishing each other luck. The old neighborhood looked rough when Emma finally reached it. This area had been hit hard, lots of bodies, lots of infected. Emma's childhood home, where her mother still lived, was on a quiet street lined with small houses. Emma's heart sank when she saw her mom's front door was open, hanging crooked on its hinges. No. No, no, no. She approached slowly, bat raised, calling out quietly. Mama? It's Emma. Are you here? No answer. She stepped inside, fighting panic. The living room was trashed, furniture overturned, pictures knocked off walls. Signs of a struggle. Blood on the floor. Emma followed the trail, tears streaming down her face, into the kitchen. Her mother wasn't there. No body, no sign of what happened, just more evidence of a fight and then nothing. Emma searched the whole house but found it empty. She tried to tell herself that was good, that it meant her mother might have gotten away, might have evacuated or made it to safety. But the blood, the struggle, it all pointed to a darker conclusion. Emma collapsed on her childhood bed and let herself cry for 5 minutes, just 5 minutes to grieve and feel and break down. Then she wiped her eyes, steadied her breathing, and got up. Surviving meant moving forward. She grabbed a few items from the house, her mother's rosary, a family photo, and headed back out into the nightmare. Thomas Bennett and his group had spent the day monitoring the situation and fortifying their position. The military presence in downtown had actually increased, more troops rolling in, helicopters flying overhead. The infected were being systematically cleared from certain areas, pushed back, contained. It gave everyone hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity was fighting back successfully. Kevin got in touch with his contact at Selfridge through an emergency radio one of the security guards had found. The base was accepting refugees but was getting overwhelmed. They needed to establish better screening procedures, make sure infected didn't get inside. The wait time for evacuation was getting longer. Bobby had become the group's information specialist, constantly monitoring any working internet connections, ham radios, emergency broadcasts. He reported that some smaller towns and rural areas were successfully keeping the infected out, forming militia and securing their borders. The infection seemed to spread faster in dense urban populations, which made sense. More people meant more potential hosts. The government was establishing a chain of safe zones across the country, but it was slow going and resources were stretched thin. Ashley Thompson had calmed down somewhat, accepting that for now, they were safer inside than out. She'd connected with her daughter's babysitter through a working phone line and learned they'd made it to a shelter at a local school that was being protected by National Guard. Knowing her daughter was relatively safe let Ashley focus on surviving herself, on getting through this so she could reunite with her child. She and Tom had become friends of sorts, bonding over their worry for their kids, sharing stories and photos, keeping each other sane. As the second night fell, the group in the Renaissance Center settled into their routines, rotating watches, rationing food, trying to maintain some sense of normalcy in a world gone insane. Tom took the midnight watch with Kevin, and the two men stood looking out over the burning city. Kevin said quietly, "You know, I've seen combat, seen some terrible things overseas, but this is different. This is our home, our people. It hits different." Tom agreed. This wasn't some far-off war, this was their lives, their world, coming apart at the seams. But Kevin also said something that stuck with Tom: "We're survivors though. Humans are stubborn, adaptable. We'll find a way through this. We always do." Jake Mitchell spent his second night in the warehouse, feeling infinitely safer than he had in his apartment. Marcus had set up a pretty solid operation, with defenses, supplies, and a group of people who were working together. They'd spent the day reinforcing the fence, blocking off unnecessary entrances, creating a secure perimeter. One of the warehouse guys, Danny Silva, had been in construction and knew about building defenses. Under his guidance, they'd created choke points, places where if infected did get in, they could be funneled and dealt with. The group had also established rules. Everyone pulled their weight, no exceptions. Everyone took watch shifts. Supplies were rationed fairly. And most importantly, anyone who got bit was quarantined immediately, and if they turned, they'd be dealt with quickly and humanely. Nobody liked that last rule, but everyone understood it. This was survival, and hard choices were part of the package now. Jake found himself adapting quicker than he'd thought possible. Turns out all those years of video games and zombie movies had actually taught him a few things about survival strategy, even if the reality was 1,000 times more terrifying. Emma made it back to Dearborn by nightfall, emotionally drained but physically intact. She'd stopped at 2 other relatives' houses on the way, hoping to find someone, anyone from her family. Her aunt and uncle's place was burned out, just a shell. Her cousin's apartment was locked up tight but no one answered her knocking. Either they'd evacuated or were too scared to answer the door, and Emma couldn't blame them for that. She made it back to her own house and reinforced her barricades, then sat down to plan her next move. The convoy north was leaving tomorrow from a rally point near 8 Mile Road. That was about 8 miles from her house. She'd need to leave early, give herself plenty of time to make it safely. She spent the evening preparing, packing only what she could comfortably carry and move with. Too much gear would slow her down. She needed to be mobile, fast. Water, some food, first aid supplies, a change of clothes, her weapon, and a few personal items. That was it. Everything else, all the stuff she'd accumulated in her 24 years, didn't matter anymore. The thought was liberating in a strange way. Emma posted on the Survivor forums that she was heading to the convoy rally point, in case anyone else wanted to join or needed the information. Several people responded, saying they'd see her there, creating a small sense of community even in the chaos. As that second night deepened, across Detroit and cities around the world, millions of people were making similar calculations, similar plans. Some would hunker down and wait it out. Some would make runs for safety. Some wouldn't survive the night. The zombie outbreak had shattered the world everyone knew, broken apart the comfortable assumptions of modern life. But it had also revealed something important about humanity, the will to survive, to adapt, to fight back against impossible odds. In warehouses and office buildings and suburban homes, people were coming together, forming groups, sharing resources, protecting each other. The dreams everyone had been chasing just days before, career ambitions, relationship goals, vacation plans, all of that had been shattered in an instant. But new dreams were forming, simpler and more profound. The dream of seeing tomorrow's sunrise. The dream of finding family. The dream of reaching safety. The dream of surviving long enough to rebuild, to start over, to create something from the ruins. This was the start of a new human journey, forged in terror and loss but also in resilience and hope. The old world was gone, but the new one was being written one survivor at a time, one day at a time, one small victory against the darkness at a time. Jake fell asleep that night in the warehouse surrounded by people who'd become his new family, and he dreamed not of the life he'd lost but of the life he might build. Emma set her alarm for dawn and closed her eyes, thinking of her mother's rosary in her pocket and the strength it represented, the faith that even in darkness there could be light. Thomas Bennett held his wedding ring and whispered a prayer for Linda and the kids, promising himself and them that he'd find a way back, that they'd be together again. And across the city, in countless hiding places, others made similar promises, held on to similar hopes. The massive zombie outbreak had begun, and humanity's response was just getting started. The fight for survival, for civilization, for the future itself, was underway. Some would fall, many already had, but others would rise, would lead, would find strength they never knew they had. The journey was just beginning, and though the road ahead was dark and uncertain, filled with dangers that would test every survivor to their limits, one thing was certain: humanity wasn't going down without one hell of a fight. The dreams of the old world had shattered, but from those shattered pieces, new dreams were being born. Harder dreams. Stronger dreams. The kind of dreams that might just save the world.